Hey everyone, welcome to our second ever Instagram Live Studio Talk. My name is Dwayne Brown, and I'm the founder of Headshots Matter. And our Studio Talk format was originally created to really just have conversations with photographers to learn about their creative process, learn about some of the challenges that they might be having in their studio, in their business. And now we're taking that format to Instagram Live. And today we're super excited to be inviting Jonny Edward into the Studio Talk, and just to kind of talk to him a little bit about his creative process, about how he blends humility and mindset and creative leadership into his creative process. So I'm now going to bring Jonny in. Let me just bring him in now. Jonny, good
Hello.
morning. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Good morning here. So morning works great.
Uh, that's great. So finally, we get to have a little face to face.
Yeah.
I'm very
Yeah, looks like
grateful.
how does the audio sound to you, Dwayne? Because I'm not using my AirPods. I can put my AirPods on if it sounds muffled.
Oh, that's a good question. Actually, I was going to put mine in too. So I don't know. Maybe we both put ours in,
All right,
and
let's do it. We'll pair it up.
yeah, we'll pair it up. Here we here we go. Let's give that a little test.
Okay. Let's see here. And of course it's
I can't quite hear you yet. Can you hear me?
can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay, perfect.
Terrific. So, Jonny, how are you?
I'm I'm well. I'm finally well. I've been traveling a lot. I was just in Mexico for nearly 2 weeks, and I
Yeah.
ended up getting pretty sick.
All
So
right.
it's been the road to recovery, but that's okay. So I incidentally lost the weight that I wanted to lose, but not in the way I wanted to lose it.
Wow.
But yeah, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling rested. I'm feeling inspired. I'm feeling excited to reconnect with the community and my art and all of that type of
Right.
stuff.
You were in Mexico for a couple weeks, right?
I was, yeah. So I ran a couple of workshops down there. I ran a workshop in Puebla and Mexico City, and then I spoke at one of the biggest conferences there in Aguascalientes. So I did that type of thing there. So yeah, I was all over the country and had a really great time. The culture, the community, the people. It was just really lovely.
What I loved watching was just when you took the I want to say the kids, the young photographers. You were out on the street, you're having fun.
Yeah.
It looked like a blast.
I think that's one of the big things. Like as an educator, I think in the industry, like people tend to get very I'll use the word stoic or a little bit uptight,
Yeah,
where I mean, what we do is very important. I feel that our role as photographers is phenomenally important, but we don't have to take ourselves too seriously, especially in an education role. So we
yeah,
can do really serious, powerful work without being overly serious about that process.
yeah. So now that you're back, are you working on anything that's kind of jazzing you now? That's got you excited and inspired?
I mean, I think just being able to finally go through all of the work that I've created over the past, month and a half or 2 months is a really big deal. I was in New York. I taught with Lindsay Adler.
Yeah.
I worked with Nanlight out there. Then I was in Atlanta for Boca Summit. So I have this backlog
Mm.
of really, really incredible work. So it feels nice to have some breathing room to finally take all of that work and say, okay, I can curate it, I can edit it, and I can actually share it and bring it to light and life a little bit. So as of
Yeah.
right now, that's my biggest goal is just sleeping as much as possible and editing as much work as possible.
Um, so, so when I first mentioned to you about doing a live and having a chat, I think what I mentioned to you is I wanted it to kind of brush on the concept of gratitude and humility and that sort
Yeah.
of thing. And I wanted to sort of explain to the viewers of why I wanted to do that. So when I first was when I first saw your work on Instagram, I immediately was taken with the theatrical presentation of it, and it was really, really beautiful. Was, is, and but what kept me interested was this element of gratitude and humility that kind of just seem to kind of move through, the words that you always are showing gratitude for the people that you photographed, the team. And then I remember mentioning, I sent you a message and just complimenting you and just in how you treated me. I was a stranger, but you treated me like a friend and with this great element of kindness. And I just was really taken by that. And then as we've gotten to know each other, and I see and watch more of your work, and I see interviews, and I see you being so well revered in our community, but your feet are firmly planted on the ground, and and I just wanted to ask you about that. Like, how does humility and gratitude play into your creative process? And if it does, like, can you give us some examples of that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, to be honest, I think the humility and the gratitude is sort of just rooted into who I am. So I think it's just part of who I am as an individual, a man. And then obviously that moves into who I am as an artist and a creative and that type of thing. But I think it's just a byproduct of having been through a lot in my life. It's like I've struggled a lot. When I was younger, I did. At my own hands as an adult, I have. So there's just been a lot of struggle, a lot of pain, a lot of trauma. And so with that being said, I think there's a gratitude for this opportunity that I have now
Yeah.
to be able to support myself, to support my family with art, to be able to connect to our incredible community. So every day I wake up, it's kind of like the old timer thing. People are like, "Why are you in a good mood?" I'm like, "Well, I'm above ground." So that's my precedent. And yeah, I think it's just it's a byproduct of legitimately loving people. I
Yeah.
really love life. I love people. I love the opportunity to connect. I love the opportunity to tell stories. So whenever I'm doing what I do, I think there's just this element of joy and thankfulness.
Mm,
And I try and infuse that into my process because I think that's something that's really lacking in our world.
mm,
Um, I understand why fundamentally. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of distance, there's a lot of dissonance, but I want to be a counterpoint to that insofar as I can
yeah.
with everything that I do. So I think it's all rooted in love and in gratitude and
Mm,
joy and just an appreciation for this beautiful opportunity that I have in this life, and I just want to pay that forward insofar
mm.
as I can, as often as I can.
And I would imagine that that sense of empathy that you bring to a shoot really helps the person in front of your camera trust you, because
Absolutely.
they they may not come to the studio with the idea of what you're going to do. They may have a sense of it, but you're taking them on a little bit of a journey, and for them to truly trust you, they need to know that you've got their back, right?
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. I think, I consider my process conversational when I talk about it. I say that ultimately I'm a talker who happens to have a camera in their hand.
Yeah.
So, if we were together in my studio, this would be the same conversation we'd be having. I'd say, "Oh, actually, that's great right there. Just hang on for a second," and the camera
Mm,
comes up. But
yeah.
it's secondary or tertiary to us existing in a space together as human beings, and then those other elements start to come into play once there's that rapport and connection.
Yeah. I think in this world where everything is about I don't know, there's a lot of noise and a lot of busyness and a lot of likes and loves and all that stuff. And I think just if you can have someone in front of you and just not to be so cliche, but to really allow them to feel seen, right? To
Yeah.
to feel respected. It just it for maybe the rest of the world doesn't give them that, doesn't afford them that. So when they come to your studio for this cool creative experience, maybe what they're actually really getting is this really kind of simple connection with someone who cares.
That's certainly what I aspire to, and I do think it's strange. There's the paradox where we're more connected than we've ever been technologically, but
Yeah,
we're also more disparate and disconnected than we've ever been humanistically.
yeah,
So, if any of you out there have this experience, it's like when you ask someone how they're doing and you look them in the eye and they know
mm,
you mean it,
mm,
and then they just sort of flood with all of
yeah,
this stuff because they so rarely in their lives do they have an opportunity when someone is like, "How are you? What do you need? What's going on in your world?" And they say that with heart and intention. So I agree. I think it's this very simplistic but very powerful element of someone feeling seen, and heard and just accepted as they are, not because they're beautiful, not because they're happy, but regardless of their state of mind and being an aesthetic, just being accepted and embraced
Yeah.
in any given moment. I think that's a gift that we can give to the people who we create with, who we photograph.
Mm-hmm. I think that most of the folks that will follow, any photographer, any artist online, they're very focused on the end result, and
Yeah.
they don't get to see the process it gets that photographer and that person there. Can you just give us a little bit of a sense of if I was coming in for a shoot and I had hired you to be my photographer, what would the process be? I walk through the door. Do we get right to it? Do we like what's the process?
So I think the first part of that is just making sure that we're establishing some rapport ahead of time. So if you hit me up on Instagram, or if you submitted an inquiry form or something, the first step would be, hey, let's get together for a cup of coffee, or if that's not possible, let's jump on a Zoom call or
Yeah.
a meeting. And I would just want to get to know you as an individual.
Mm,
So it's like whether it's personal branding or something more creative, like who are you? What drives you? What's your story? Where
mm,
are you at in life? Where do you want to be? What are you looking to achieve from these photos? What are the things that inspire you? What are the
mm,
things that drive you as a man and a person? So before you ever walk through the door, I want to have a legitimate sense of who you are, and I want you to have a sense of who I am.
right.
So when you walk through the front door of my studio, you don't really feel like you're walking through the door of a studio. You feel like you're going to spend time with a friend. And
Hmm.
so there's that immediate you walk through. I'm like, well, hey, how was that project you did last week? I know you were really excited about that.
Yeah.
And so there's these points of contact and connection right off the bat. And then I talk a lot. So if you came in right now, we might have an idea and it might be this set, but I would have the lights generally around, but I would be
Yeah.
setting these up in real time. We'd be talking about texture. I'd be
Mm,
showing you things as we went along. So it might take us 20 minutes to get into that place where I first create a portrait, where I
right.
click the shutter. But over the course of that 20 minutes, we're just establishing some energetic precedent. So by the time the camera does come up, you're not back here in fear. You're like, oh yeah, of course, we're just friends hanging out, and he happens to have a
Yeah.
camera. This is great. So it's all once again, it goes back to that idea of finding being genuinely interested in the people in front of my camera,
Mm,
and then finding those points of rapport that we can build on, and just making people feel at ease insofar as I can. I think that's a really
mhm,
big part of what I do.
mm. You know, when I was piecing together my ideas on what I wanted to talk to you about, I really wanted to, talk about the humility and gratitude and mindset and kindness and those sort of things. And we are. But then something kind of clicked for me that yes, you're an artist. Yes, you're a creative person. Yes, you're a good human being. But I also believe that you have this responsibility, whether you want it or not, as being a creative leader. And they sort of say that trust is sometimes described as the currency of leadership.
Mm,
And I think that when the person we talk about the person that you're photographing, that they matter greatly, but you work with teams as well, and you have photographers that are watching. They're in seminars, and so I think that it really kind of hit me that you are, yes, a creative person, but you're a leader for many to look up to. So not to put that weight on your shoulders, but it's already there anyway. I just does that resonate with you that you feel that responsibility?
No, it does, and I think responsibility is one of those words that I think people shirk from.
Yeah.
It's like we hear responsibility and we go, oh, the responsibility of work, of family. Like for a
Yeah.
lot of people, I think the connotation is burdensome, but for me, it's not.
Mm,
It's an honorific. I feel like I'm in a position in this industry that I'm so, once again, thankful for, where I can exert influence in a positive way.
mhm,
So I feel that responsibility. I feel that weight on my shoulders, and I do my best to carry it
mm,
and be aware of it with poise and with grace and with gratitude.
mhm,
And I always want to point people in the right direction, whatever the right
mm.
direction is for them. So yeah, I think it's one of those elements where the brighter you shine in the world, the more people are going to be drawn to that,
Yeah.
because right now we exist in a very dimly lit world. So, naturally, if you're a person who puts that off, you have to become comfortable or be comfortable with the fact that people are going
Mhm,
to be drawn to light in a dark space
mm,
naturally.
yeah.
And it's sad that we are in such a state of affairs in the world right now, but I
Mm,
consider it an absolute honor to be able to shed some light onto that and hopefully give people a little bit of inspiration and hope and maybe just a reprieve, even if it's just a smile.
Yeah.
Sometimes just being able to laugh for a moment and get away from the chaos and just exist for 5 minutes in a microcosm together is enough to hit the reset button and give us the gumption to keep carrying forward on whatever our path might be.
Yeah, I think we mentioned this one time that I think that again, whether you believe in the universe or not, I do.
I do.
Sometimes the universe sort of brings people together for certain reasons, right?
Agreed.
And at Headshots Matter, we have a I don't know about 200 or 225 members, and yes, the world is in a pretty kooky place right now, but our community, it's a safe space for everyone,
Yeah.
and we're not, it's not about ego, and it's not about sort of trying to outdo anybody. We're here to support and celebrate, and you are too, and I think so. You and I sort of kind of connected on that level, and I'm very grateful for that, and that's why I wanted to ask you to be a legacy member, and I'm so grateful that you accepted that, because I think we do, as creative people and just as human beings, we have responsibilities to each other to
Yeah.
just kind of keep an eye on each other, and at times give each other a little bit of support. So
I agree.
yeah.
And I really value that in you and in the community. I think that's a
Mm,
really beautiful thing, once again, to be able to carve out this microcosm and
yeah.
not a microcosm that's detached from the real world, a microcosm that's hyper aware of the real world, but because of that is
Yeah.
crafted in a specific way to create that safety, to create that acceptance, to create that sense of togetherness. I think we need that now
Mm,
more than
mhm,
ever. So it's really powerful. And I think just as photographers, we have a responsibility to the people who are in front of our camera.
mm,
I speak about this a lot, but we wield an immense amount of power as photographers. I really do
mhm.
believe that we're alchemists and we're healers, but with power comes responsibility because power can go either way.
Yeah.
So we can really lift people up from behind the camera, or we can really diminish and put people down. So
Sure.
every time someone steps in front of my camera, I feel the responsibility of that once again in a positive way, but just knowing I
Mm,
can be a positive impact and influence on this person when they walk out the door. They
yeah.
could feel better or they could feel worse.
Yeah.
And that burden is on me to decide based on my action, based on my process, based on
Mm.
my interaction, how is that person going to be affected and impacted by what I do, what I say, and what I create?
Yeah, it's a lovely responsibility, and you must have people like that come into the studio for different reasons. Like they may even be coming in for emotional reasons, that maybe they've gone through a very difficult time in their life, and they're coming to you to be photographed, to go through a creative process, and then to see themselves perhaps in a different light. It must be really cool when you show them, whether you tether or you show in the back of the camera, when they look at it, and all of a sudden they feel a little lighter.
Yeah,
I'm sure you probably get a tear or two that happens in your studio as well, right? And I
absolutely.
think that must be really, really, really cool.
It is. It's beautiful and it's powerful. And I think a lot of people do seek me out when they're in periods of transition. I
Yeah.
think people looking for some semblance of catharsis,
Mm,
find their way to me. So yeah, at this point, I'm really, really grateful to say that I've sort of become a photographer's photographer.
mm,
So most of my clients now are photographers who are like, hey, I need new branding images, but I
yeah,
also want to explore this aspect of identity, or I want
yeah,
to try and tell a story about this part of my journey or that type of thing. So it's sort of
mm,
storytelling meets what I would consider to be more commercial type work. And somewhere in the middle, I think there's this beautiful catalyst where someone can say, like, hey, I'm an artist, but I'm also a human being.
yeah,
Hey, these are really great elements and these are not. And it comes back to this idea of like radical acceptance. I want my studio to be a place where people feel like they can radically accept themselves and where they can
mm,
be radically accepted by me and
mm,
potentially by me and my team, depending on how that's built out to suit
mm.
their needs and their wants and so on.
How many people would be on a particular set? Like one person comes in for the shoot,
Yeah.
with one assistant, hair and makeup. How many people
So
typically are
it
you working with?
It varies. I'll be completely honest. If it's an individual client versus a commercial client, I try to keep my team as limited as possible,
Yeah,
just because those are all emotional variables.
yeah,
So I think we're all going through things. So it's like I may have an assistant, I may not, depending on the complexity. Hair and makeup may be there, they may stay or they may not. So,
yeah,
I would say on the high end for an individual client, we're probably looking at 3 to 4 people in addition to myself.
yeah,
But if possible, oftentimes I would rather just be alone in the space with an
yeah,
individual because that way I know that there's not any peripheral elements that are potentially going to have an impact on that
Yeah.
person. Now, when you get a team together and everyone's on the same page,
Yeah.
energetically and creatively, nothing can match that.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing can match that. But once again, if someone comes in and they're having a rough day and they're dealing with a lot,
Mm.
even if they're doing a good job curating that, there's still a subconscious energetic element that's going to permeate into
Mhm.
set, into scene, into the studio. So I try and keep things limited to be able to curate the experience for whoever's in front of my camera to the greatest degree, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah, for sure. And of course you would curate that team so that they're also good folks,
Oh,
right
oh,
there,
of course,
right?
absolutely. And I'm very fortunate here in Colorado and in LA and New York to have just beautiful, wonderful
Yeah.
people. I mean, they're great artists, but first and foremost, they're really incredible people. And they have a similar heart, they have a similar mindset. They're about community, they're about lifting people up, they're about
Mhm.
celebrating people. So, when teams do have to be built out, I know some really, really wonderful human beings who I can
Mhm.
call on so that we can, really craft a powerful experience for whoever it is that we're working with.
Yeah. So when I look at your photographs, this is meant to be as a compliment.
Please.
I don't feel there's a team. I feel that there's
Mm,
just you, and I feel very connected to the person. And it's just and also what's really fun is when you do some of the behind the scenes photos, you're running around. It's so fun to watch because I can imagine just how excited you are about moving a light
yeah,
and being a part of you are part of almost the scene itself, which I think is pretty neat. But I have to ask you though,
please.
so you're a confident person, but do you wake up in the morning on some days and you have a very important shoot? Do you ever still get nervous?
Absolutely, all the time. I
Hmm.
think I think that we become very good. It's like I've done acting when I was younger. I did speaking in other industries. And so, I'm a person who's very good at wearing a mask if I need to.
Yeah,
So I could walk into a room and everyone would just go, "Oh, he's the star of the party and he's the light of the show and he's so comfortable and confident." Inside, I'm just screeching.
yeah,
Inside, it's just dissonance and anxiety. So I
yeah,
still, before every shoot, I get nervous. And before every time I speak or teach, I'm nervous. Even today, I was pacing around and I got a little bit sweaty and I'm like, oh, what if there's a technical issue? What if the talk
yeah,
doesn't go right? So there's still that voice in the back of my head. But to me, that's a marker that I care. I
yeah,
think if I'm not nervous about something, it means that I'm detached from it.
yeah,
And that's
yeah,
not a good thing for me. So I look
yeah,
at the nerves sort of like a Broadway actor would, and I'm like, hey, it's just part of my process. When I'm doing
yeah,
something that's important to me, I get nervous. And then as soon as I start doing it, the nerves are gone.
yeah.
And certainly some days I feel more confident than others. Some days I walk into the studio and I'm like, this is going to be an amazing shoot. I
Yeah.
know it's going to be perfect. Other days I walk in just completely burdened by doubt,
Hmm.
and self-loathing, and I have to work to let go of that so that I can be present to do what it is I need to do.
Yeah. My wife Jennifer says that nervousness is the other side of excitement,
Yeah,
and
I
I
agree.
agree. I also think that like you said, it means you care. It means that you have your pencil sharpened
Yeah,
because you really want to be on top of things. I remember hearing an interview of the great singer Tony Bennett,
yeah.
and he was in his late 80s, and he was asked the same question. Do you still get nervous? He says, "Yeah, of course. It's because," he said, "it's because I care.
Yeah,
I love what I do, and I care that every performance is I'm at my best." So I think just nervousness, it just needs to be, I guess, at the time when you're feeling I was a little nervous today too, to be honest. But we just have to sort of kind of breathe through it and then just
absolutely.
put yourself, start the process and then it flows, right?
Well, I agree. And I think as an educator, what I found is it's really, really powerful. And I did this in Mexico. Mexico was interesting for me because I can speak very little Spanish. And
Hmm.
I'm working on that now, but I had to work with a translator for everything too. And my translators were incredible, but I
Yeah,
talk so fast
yeah, yeah,
and it's very free associative that I was like, I have to pace this right. I can't use idioms that can't properly be expressed in translation. So
yeah.
I was so nervous, but I just expressed that. When I was teaching my workshops or giving my keynote, I was like, hey, everyone, I want you to know, like, I'm nervous as hell right now. And the reason being is I want to give all of you an incredible experience, but
Yeah.
it's so beautifully humanizing to just express that in a room because people go, wow, like he's nervous, he gets nervous too. And there's automatically this point of contact and connect because it's like, oh, if I'm nervous, I'm okay. I think especially we deify people whose work we look up to, and we assume that
Mhm.
they don't get nervous and everything's perfect and they don't struggle and there's no process. So to
Mhm.
see the human element of failure, to see the human element of nervousness and anxiety, to do that, I think that's a really beautiful way for us to connect just by
Mhm.
having these conversations and speaking how we're feeling out loud.
Yeah.
That alone is a powerful bridge between you and me and us and the community.
Sure, sure. I remember, I started my career in the '80s, and it was in the day when lights were connected to capacitor boxes with
Yeah.
cords and stuff, and I would get nervous, and 'cause I was in my early 20s, and I occasionally, more than occasionally, would trip on a cord, and then I would start feeling really bad about that, and then I
Yep.
thought, no, it's almost like the universe sort of making me look a little silly. So the
Yep.
person in front of my camera would go, "Oh yeah, yeah, it's fine.
Absolutely.
I don't have to be so nervous." Yeah, we just sort of share and shoulder it together, right?
Exactly. Well, and I,
Mm,
I I set that precedent. Like anyone who's been at my workshops or who has been photographed by me knows that. Like one of the things that I say in like my TED talk to start things out is I am a very clumsy person. I'm going to get wrapped up in what I'm doing. I'm going to knock over a light. I'm going
yeah,
to trip over something. I'll do like, the Willy Wonka roll and I'll be fine.
yeah,
In fact, in Mexico, I was tethering when I was teaching because I do when I teach, even though I don't when I shoot. And I
yeah,
stepped on my tether cable. My camera fell out of my hand and hit like lens barrel first on the ground and
yes,
everybody gasped. And I just, a year or two ago, I would have been mortified.
yeah,
I would have froze up and like walked off and splashed water on my face, but I just laughed about it. And I'm like, hey, everyone, this is a teaching element too. This is why you have good insurance because
yeah,
shit happens,
yeah,
and I'm like, we're
for
going to let it
sure.
go and we're going to move on. That's
Yeah.
okay.
Someone once told me, shit always happens, and it doesn't
Yep.
really matter that it happens. It matters how you handle it when it happens,
Absolutely.
right? Especially if perhaps it's an assistant that knocked over that camera.
Yeah.
You got to just roll with it, and it's just part of the deal.
Well, and especially when we talk about being in front of a client, I think like the clients generally are going to mirror our energy. So if you have a client and you accidentally knock over a light and you start freaking out and you're
Yeah,
like, oh my God, this is terrible, like they're going to absorb all of that energy. If you do
yeah,
something like that and you can just laugh it off and
yeah,
you're like, well, it looks like all of your session fees are going to getting a new light. That's great. I'm so happy you're here.
yeah.
All of a sudden, not only does it not create a disconnect, it creates an even stronger connection between you and the person. So you're absolutely right. Like all things in life, it's not the thing itself, it's what we do with that thing that really defines the end point of it.
Sure, sure. Talking about things happening that you don't expect, has there been or does it happen occasionally where a curveball comes in or an accident happens? And I always like to kind of call those sort of happy accidents. Is that sort of something that might happen in a shoot that you just kind of run with it, or that something, kind of it presents itself that you weren't expecting?
I say that happens all the time.
Hmm.
Basically it's expect the unexpected. That's what it is in my book. So,
Yeah,
I mean, it could be a technical issue. Once again, it could be a lens all of a sudden is malfunctioning. It could be an issue with lights,
yeah,
and oftentimes I think like, especially when I was using strobes before, occasionally I'd have like a misfire or something, and I'm trying to sort that out. And then I'd look at my camera and I'd go, wow, that looks beautiful as a silhouette. Like my key light didn't fire. All that I'm getting is the background light. Look at how brilliant they look with just this. So
yeah.
not only do I try and roll with that, I try and avail myself to the idea that, hey, maybe it is a universal nudge.
Hmm.
Maybe I'm being too linear. Maybe I'm being too tight
Hmm.
knit. And the
Hmm.
universe is giving me, the push going like, hey, try and look at this from a different perspective and see how you feel. See if that
Yeah.
resonates.
Yeah. Yeah, the universe is always paying attention, right?
Yeah,
So how we handle things, how we treat people,
absolutely.
and it can smile on us, or maybe not always. But if you work with it, right?
It goes both ways for sure.
Um, Tell me about your studio. So again, it's when people watch the behind the scenes, and sometimes you'll do pans. It's the envy of many photographers. It just feels like just this cool, open, industrial. Ready for. How did you find it? How big is it? Do you live there? Live there?
So it's sort of a live workspace. Like there's an apartment in the back of the building up top.
Yeah,
So that's really nice. So I have the shortest commute to work ever. I walk down a flight of stairs to get to the studio. It's brilliant. It's not directly above the studio. If it was, I'd probably put a fire person's pole in so I could just slide in to work. But space wise, it's about in total roughly 3,000 square feet. So it is
great.
a large space. There's 15-foot ceiling, so I have plenty of ceiling height.
Yeah,
I actually just stumbled into it years and years ago. Oh, this was about 3.5 years ago. I had been attacked, so I was stabbed in Denver, and we don't need to get into that story. But long story short, it sidelined me. It happened outside of my old studio. When I started to get my mobility back, I was like, I just couldn't work out of that old studio anymore because of the associations.
yeah,
So this studio at that time was actually ran by a friend of mine, Mark Worsler, who's an amazing painter and fabricator, and
yeah,
they had sort of an art collective going on in here. So there were fashion designers, there were oil painters, there were all of these people that were co-occupying the space,
mm,
and that collective was falling apart. So he had reached out to me and he's like, "Hey, I'm looking to get out of my lease," and he was actually asking for legal advice. He's like,
yeah,
"How might I do this without suffering penalty?"
yeah,
And automatically, I had visited the space before, and I'm like, well, I want to come see it and learn
yeah,
more about what this would entail because I may want to take that lease over from you. And met with the landlord, and I would call it going back to the universe. It was just serendipity and
yeah,
synchronicity. I just happened to need a space, and this space happened to be beautiful, and the windows and the scope and the scale, and it's in this really sweet generational area where, older folks bring me, muffins and wingback chairs
yeah,
and like all of
fantastic.
this. So, and then it was just curating the space. So then
Yeah,
it became, how do we set up vignettes in here? How are we driven by texture and tone? And just wanting to create a space that didn't feel like a studio. I
mm,
sort of joke around about that. I consider it like the anti-studio. There's no cyc wall. There's not the traditional furniture. There's none of that in here. And there's nothing wrong with that at all if you have that
yeah,
kind of space or work out of it. But for me, I wanted it to feel like an artist loft. So I
yeah,
want people to walk in and immediately sit down and go, I don't want to leave. I feel at home. And that's been the energetic element. And then I've tried to match the aesthetic to that energetic. And
yeah.
it's been a lot of curation, just a lot of love, a lot of
Mm.
passion, a lot of curation.
Yeah, it definitely feels more like a painter studio than a
Yeah,
photography studio, which
which
is
which I
wonderful.
love.
Yeah.
I mean, even the floors in here, people ask about the floors, and I could even take my phone off and show you.
Mm,
But there was the old asbestos tile that was in here, and at some point they pulled that up. It was probably in the 70s, and they did a really bad job
yeah,
because a lot of the black mastic was left. But
perfect.
because of the mastic that's on the floor, it creates this beautiful, almost marble or stone-like texture.
Yeah,
And so even that, the floors are perfect. And people are like, who did your floors? And I'm like, well, probably someone who got paid a 12 pack of beer and 20
yeah,
bucks, in the
yeah,
in the 1960s and just didn't do it well, but it turned out absolutely spectacular.
yeah.
So
Brilliant. Do you shoot with music, or do
I
you keep
do.
it quiet? Yeah.
Oh no, absolutely. Music is an integral part of my process. I think music probably more than anything else
Mm,
defines emotion. I
mm,
think smell for people and then music are automatic catalysts for emotion. So I'm always all about like what does the person like musically and
mm,
what type of emotion are we trying to convey?
mm,
So if let's say we want to express something that's melancholy for you, I'd be like, hey, what's the music that you like that just puts you in a reflective state of mind?
yeah,
And whether that's Billy Joel or whether that's Tony Bennett or whether that's Yo-Yo Ma,
yeah,
or Spice Girls or whatever it might be,
yeah,
I'm like, let's put that on so that we have this sort of subconscious line through what it is that we're doing.
yeah.
And it's a really, really big part of my process for sure.
Mm. Is there anybody that you would really love to photograph that is sort of in your kind of imagination and what you'd love to have in front of your camera?
Oh, that is incredibly, incredibly challenging to answer.
Mm,
I don't know. There's some big time photographers who have really influenced me who I would love to photograph. Like I'd love to photograph Paolo Roversi. He's one of my favorites, and he's out
mm,
in France now. The Italian gentleman who shoots, for all the big fashion houses like Dior. I'd love to photograph Annie Leibovitz.
yeah.
So I feel like a lot of these people who have had a big
Huh,
influence on me, photographers, I would really, really love to photograph.
mm, mm,
Beyond that, it's sort of strange. I went the opposite way. I think even 6 months ago or a year ago, I probably would have had a list of celebrities that I could have rallied off to you.
yeah.
Whether they're activists or whether they're musicians or whatever it might be, or painters or sculptors. But I think now I'm feeling very driven to just photograph everyday people more. Like that's where I really started with my portraiture, was candid street portraiture. And I love working with models. I
Yeah.
love working with celebrities. I love working with people of note, but I'm feeling very driven to get back to sort of like my inner Irving Penn, to
Yeah.
just say, hey, here are people who are existing in the world. I want to shine a light on them because they're significant, because they're important, because their story matters. Even if their
Mm,
story societally might be viewed as something that's more banal or mundane, there's still
mm,
so much beauty and magic and power in their presence, their life, their journey, that I'm really feeling drawn back to more of the everyday, and especially here, more of the Americana. I basically want to get in an
yeah.
RV and just drive and do, a tour where I'm just photographing people
Yeah.
that I encounter.
Wouldn't that be cool, right? Just to yeah, to rent something and do a coast to coast or
Yeah,
uh,
exactly.
I like that. I like that a lot. And I think especially what's going on in our global political kind of turmoil. Just regular folks that are just
Exactly.
trying to make a living. They're trying to
Yep.
just wiggle their way through the nuttiness that we're all in right now. I think that's a great group of people to point our cameras at for
I
sure.
agree. And I think there's something really beautiful in terms of community with that as well.
Yeah.
It's even that element. I think it's beautiful for those people to have the
Mm,
spotlight for a while, to be able to share their story, but then it's also really beautiful for other people to see and read and feel those stories,
yeah.
because sometimes we don't have to be photographed to feel seen,
Yeah.
right? If we're in a similar position and we see someone else who has a similar story and they're seen, when they're seen, we're seen a little bit as well. There's an
Yeah.
element. So I think there's this really beautiful connectivity and reciprocity in that. And I'm feeling very drawn to it. So I think that'll happen over
Mm,
the next year or so. I'll have someone come in and take
mm,
care of the studio,
mm.
and, get a van or an RV and just go coast to coast and see what happens. And the real dream is to do it analog. So get like,
Yeah.
an old muscle car and
Yeah.
bring out the film cameras, the RB67 and the maps, and just put the digital
Okay.
aside and just exist in
Sure.
in celluloid and in mechanics for a while, away from the digital
Mm,
medium.
mm. Yeah, very cool. What inspires you? Like what kind of gets you kind of excited? Not necessarily to create inspiration for a shoot, but just what keeps you kind of excited to move forward? Like even to come up with an idea like that. Like is it other projects? Is it like what is it internal? Is it what inspires you?
I think one of the biggest things is probably just the unknown.
Mm,
I love travel, and one of the things that I love about travel are traveling to places that I haven't been. So,
mm,
like I have a workshop or a retreat coming up in early October, and it's going to be in the south of France, and I've never been,
yeah.
and we're doing it at this chateau. So I'm so incredibly excited to be in a new space, to be around new people, to be in a new environment. So I'm very, very driven by the unknown and the new, and that has to do with human beings, that has to do with travel, that has to do with experience, that
Mm,
has to do with cuisine. So I feel, like this life, we have this beautiful opportunity, despite the geopolitical landscape, despite the socioeconomic landscape. It's never been easier to travel the world and experience other places and people and things than it is now.
yeah.
And so I really want to live into that. So that's a big thing. I feel very driven by people's stories.
Mm,
I feel very driven by that. And I'm just driven by nature and art in general. Like when I was in Mexico, my hosts were kind enough to bring me to the biggest museum in Mexico City, and they had a retrospective of Rodin, the
mm,
sculptor, his work. And it was this beautiful collection of his work. And I stood in
mm,
awe. And he's been such a big influence on my art. And
yeah.
so to stand in front of these original pieces, the gates, the doors to hell from Dante's Inferno that were bigger than my studio, it was so
Yeah.
humbling and so awe-inspiring. And I happened to just be in the right place at the right time to experience that.
Mm, mm,
So, I think it's just this idea of the novel in the new, and it doesn't even have to be a good experience. I think sometimes my favorite
yeah.
experiences are the ones that in the moment I'm like, this is awful,
Yeah.
but it gives me so much in terms of, wisdom or a perspective or whatever it might be. So it's just it's wanting to live as full a life as possible while I'm still here. I think that's what it really comes down to.
Yeah. Yeah. No doubt. So how does someone like yourself who is very revered, very admired, very loved, um, and has a lot of attention all the time coming in. And I can't imagine what your direct messages look like. How do you keep your feet planted on the ground and not let it kind of take your ego too big. Like what?
I think naturally it's something that I've worked on a lot over the past couple of years, but I think there's such a component of me that's so rooted in self-loathing that I think that alone has been, the anchor that's sort of kept my
Yeah,
think that's a really big part of it, but it's
yeah,
it's an awareness of the ephemeral nature of things. I
mm,
think that's what it is. One of the mottos that I live by is memento mori, which is remember death, not to be macabre, but it is that all things
mm,
are finite. So I
sure,
think even, in this period right now, I don't think that I've ever been more known or had more momentum as a photographer and an educator than I do right now.
yeah,
But it's also knowing that tomorrow that could be completely different.
yeah,
So, that is always the counterpoint in my mindset. And it's just,
mm,
I've never sought fame. I've always wanted to have a voice because I feel like with a voice, I can exert a positive influence on the
sure,
world. But I've never sought fame just for fame. And it's still odd to me if you see me at a conference or out and about and someone stops me and they're like, "Hey, Johnny, can I get a selfie?" It's so wonderful and I'm grateful for it, but it's still strange
yeah,
to be recognized for that. So I think it's probably just my life and my
yeah,
experience and in sort of my personhood more than anything else. But
sure,
even for DMs, it's like I think one of the things that I become known for is that I respond to everyone.
yeah,
If someone writes me a message, I might not get to it that day or the next day, but if they have a question about lighting or life or anything, and people will go,
mm,
"Wow, I this is so incredible. I can't believe you responded to me." And that sort of breaks my heart a little because I'm like, well, that's unfortunate that there's people out there who are getting nice notes from people and they don't even engage with them. And I understand there's limitations to that,
sure,
but it's still just that aspect because it's like all of you are the reason I'm here.
yeah,
If someone writes me, there's just that hyper awareness. The reason I got to travel to Mexico is because all of those people in Mexico wanted me there.
yeah,
So to not give to them what I can, to not give back, to not meet them somewhere in the middle feels just um I don't even know how to necessarily articulate that, but it just feels disingenuous more than anything else.
yeah. I get it. I've always used the expression that it's a life that we're participating in first and foremost, whether
Yeah,
we're photographers or doctors or lawyers or whatever we are. It's the human experience which matters most,
yeah,
and how we treat people with respect and kindness is like it costs us nothing, just some time and a little bit of I don't know, just some words. But and on that note, I just wanted to now I just thought about something else that we were going to do an Instagram live a month or so ago, and I had to kind of postpone it abruptly because my mom took a spill out in Edmonton, out in Alberta, and I had to jump on a plane right away to go and give her some support. And on that day, while I'm out there, you of course were understanding, but it wasn't just that you were understanding, and it wasn't just that you sent me a message. No, 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 you spoke a message, and you told me, you gave me and my mom, support and love, and it was really, yeah, it was cool, and it was yeah, it was a human, it was a friend supporting a friend, and
yeah.
I'm very grateful for that. And of course, I shared that with my mom, and that mattered to her, and so thank you for that.
Oh, you're so welcome. And I think, every interaction gives us an opportunity to connect on a deeper level. I
Mm,
think that's what it is. Even if I'm in an Uber and so many times they'll be like, "Oh, no one talks to me anymore." The driver will say that.
mhm,
And so if they go to say something and I have my AirPods and I'll take them out and I'll be like, "Oh, that's really interesting, this and that." And I'm not feigning, like I genuinely want to know what they have to say. And it's not just altruistic. I really like to talk about that too. It's not like I'm going around and I'm trying to be this white knight,
yeah,
where I'm making the world better for people. It makes me feel good,
mm,
to support you, to be kind, to give back. Like that makes me feel good. It makes me feel fulfilled. It makes me feel happy. So I think there's this really beautiful give and take with that, where when we're kind and we operate from that perspective, like one of my favorite things is if you're sitting with someone or you meet a stranger and you give them a compliment and they just light up.
yeah,
Literally, they're kind of downtrodden. You're like, "Wow, I love your outfit, or you have such beautiful eyes. I just had to say I'm sorry." And their whole personality changes.
yeah,
Like, what a beautiful gift to be able to give to another person in this world and to give to
mm,
ourselves
sure.
simultaneously. It's really, really powerful.
Yeah, yeah, we have power in every single interaction that we have, whether it's the
Exactly.
a barista, an Uber driver, a supermarket checkout, a client, whatever level. We have power to be. offer good
Yeah,
or good energy or bad energy, right? So yeah, what I wanted to sort of, we're getting close to our kind of time, but I think I'm kind of finding what your secret sauce is: curiosity. You are
ab-
an immensely curious person, and you have learned some expertise how to use the tools and machines that we need, to sort of harness the physics of photography, and you're using that so that you can just be curious and learn
it's
about
true.
people. It's so
I
cool,
really,
man.
I try and I always joke about this. I said, I think people ask me about my age, and I'm like, I feel like I'm 8 going on 88.
Yeah,
There's no middle ground, but it's like I try and maintain that childlike wonder and curiosity about everything. I'm curious about art. I'm curious about people. I'm curious about travel. Even these lights, when someone goes, Johnny, what happens if we put the light here? I do it not out of obligation, but because I want to know what happens. I want to see
I
what
know.
happens when we take this light and put it at my feet instead of over my face.
Yeah,
And that drives everything that I do. And it's not about the acquisition of knowledge or experience necessarily. You're right. I think it's curiosity and play.
sure.
So and that's why I even love, seeing children out and about or being around kids because they're just so they walk out and they
Hmm.
see, clouds or they see a ladybug and they're fixated on it.
Yeah.
And then when you take a second and you look, you're like, wow, that's really magnificent, isn't it? There's a ladybug on a blade of grass on this earth in the middle of a universe that's infinite, and it's
Yeah.
crawling around and it's just living its life. Like, yeah, that is
Hmm.
spectacular. And
Hmm.
somewhere along the way, I think we're taught or we're conditioned to let go of that curiosity, to let go of that wonder, to let go of that, fixation on really the magic and significance that's around us all the time. So I
Hmm.
try and cultivate that
Hmm.
consciously and maintain that connection to essentially little Johnny, my inner child. And I
Hmm.
feel like the more that I honor my inner child, the more that I can be present in this world and the more good that I can do and the more art that I can create that's actually significant, that's substantive and has depth.
Yeah. I remember when I was a young boy, my grandmother, her name was Echo, and she said to me, I don't know how old I was, 8 or 10, and she says, "I'm going to let you in on a little secret. No matter how old you get, you still feel like you're 8 or 10 years old." And I thought, oh, yeah, that stuck with me. And I think part of, again, I think it's more than that. I think it's, yes, we might have vulnerabilities that make us feel young and scared at times, but I think it's the curiosity, like you had said, the curiosity of a young child. That's what helps time or age be more fluid, and
Agreed.
not. I think as soon as we start being interested, I think then that's sort of when we kind of, maybe it's time to, not do this anymore. So yeah, keep curious, keep interested, and blend that with as much empathy and care as we can.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes there's an element of even feigning curiosity leads to genuine curiosity.
Hmm.
It's like when I was in college, one of my professors said that to me. They're like, hey, because I had to take all of these classes that weren't related to what I was interested in. And I was sort of, bemoaning that. And he's like, just pretend like you're interested for 5 minutes and you'll become genuinely interested. This
Hmm.
is what one of my professors said, and it's true. So now, if someone's talking about their job as an accountant, do I feel driven by being an accountant? No. But if I sit there and I fixate on what they're actually saying 5 minutes in, I'm like, wow, they're a forensic accountant, and this is really cool. It's kind of like CSI for numbers, and they just worked on this firm. And then
Sure.
you can generate interest as well. So I think people
Hmm.
are like, well, this just isn't interesting to me. And it's like, well, give it a chance. It's like saying, well, I don't like that food. And you're like, well, you haven't tried it this way. So just try it. If you don't like it, that's fine.
Yeah.
But it might surprise you. And all of a sudden the person's like, wow, I actually like hummus. I didn't know. I guess the
Hmm.
other hummus I had wasn't good, or whatever thing it
Yeah.
might be, big or small. I think we become very structured in our mindset. We like to say, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is what I don't do. This is
Hmm.
what I like. This is what I don't like. And so we create these rigid barriers
Hmm.
around ourselves, and then we complain about feeling trapped
Yeah.
when it's our own doing. We're trapping ourselves in our own lives, in our own patterns, in our own
Hmm.
boxes. And then we want to blame everyone but ourselves for being trapped. And so I think there's going back to the idea of responsibility.
Hmm.
I think we have a responsibility to ourselves to live our best lives and to take action over the things that are actionable in our lives. If we have the power to control or affect them, it is up to us, it is on us to
Hmm.
do just that. and to accept the burden of that for better and for worse.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got one life to live, right? Let's
Truly,
make the most let's make the most of it. I, maybe one of the things we'll maybe sort of finish on that kind
please.
of that made me think of something is that do you feel, I don't know, how do I question this? Talking about creativity, do you feel that you need to feel creative before you can do something creative, or do you just need to start the process and then you become feeling more inspired and more creative? Does that
I
make
feel
sense?
like the process is far more important. I feel like if we wait around for inspiration,
Yeah,
oftentimes inspiration doesn't come.
yeah,
In Picasso, who was a very questionable man, but obviously very talented artist, but he
yeah,
has the saying, and it's inspiration exists, but it has to find you working. And
right.
I really, truly believe that. So I have a lot of people who are like, well, you create prolifically, Johnny. How is it to feel inspired all the time? I'm like, I often do not feel inspired. But once my hands are in motion, once I'm in the studio, once I start moving things, the inspiration sort of creeps in. So I think that if we want to call it the muse, I think that muse or source is omnipresent and infinite, but we have to tap into that. And sometimes it's easy. Sometimes it's just as easy as opening our eyes. We wake up in the morning, we put our feet on the ground, and we're like, I want to make art. I
Yeah,
think other times it's the discipline of being a creative to say, like, I am going to sit down in front of the blank page or in the studio that doesn't have anything set up, and I'm simply going to see what happens if I give 30 minutes to this. So I think creatives are very interesting and that a lot of people just I don't want to say they don't want to work. I don't believe that at all. But I think that a lot of creatives feel like there should be this compulsion within them all the time. And I don't think that exists. So we have to look at our art as practice. Some of my favorite work was created when I wasn't feeling creative at all. But I gave myself to creativity and then creativity took the reins. So, people are like, what do you do to get out of a funk? And I'm like, I do anything. I just pick up my camera. And even if it feels like it weighs 10,000 pounds, I walk out the front door and I photograph, that ladybug in the grass. I photograph shadows on a wall. And as soon as I start doing that, it goes from being burdensome to liberating. But we have to take those initial steps in order to get back into that flow. So I think it's very much up to us whether or not we're connected to that flow state, based on what we're doing or what we're not doing.
but we have to participate. We have to almost sort of kind of kindle that flow state.
Absolutely.
One of the things that my wife Jennifer and I do almost every single day, we'll either do a photo walk or a photo drive. And
Yeah.
sometimes I'll ask myself, just my own personal Instagram. It has nothing to do with work. It's just
Yeah.
stuff. It's photos that make me happy.
Yeah. I
And
love that.
as soon as you get shooting stuff, it just I always say, like, what does that have to do with commercial corporate photography? That's what I do predominantly.
Yeah.
And I say it has everything to do with it because
Everything.
it keeps me moving. And so if you're doing a composition of a ladybug on a blade of grass, and you do that enough times, when you actually have a gig in front of you that you're making money from, you can compose more intuitively, and you're sort of
Absolutely.
you're in it, right? It's just part, it's not what you do, it's who you are. And anyway, so I was going to ask you, what advice would you give any younger photographers? And you've already said it. It's just keep shooting.
It's such a big deal, and it's so funny that you should bring that up because that's one of the things that I talk about a lot in my workshops. Is my workshops are not geared toward business at all. Like I am not the person to talk to about business, But when it comes to art, that's something else. But I also think there's this direct correlation with that as well, because if you're out and you're taking photos and you're doing your photo walk and you're doing your photo drive and I'm doing my thing, the other thing that that does is it makes us feel connected to this medium, to our art form, and we're excited.
Yeah.
So if I'm feeling connected to my camera when you walk into the studio and I'm excited and I'm like, oh my God, Dwayne, I'm so excited you're here. We're gonna have a wonderful day. And I'm holding my camera and it feels connected to me. You sense that. If it's drudgery, if I'm not feeding myself creatively and artistically, and I pick up that camera and it's like an anvil, you're gonna sense that weight in my hand. You're gonna sense that weight in my heart. So I think for those of us who are doing this full time, it's even or as our business, as a profession, it's even more important for
Mhm.
us to go on those photo walks. It's even more important for us to make time to create for ourselves. I don't think it's optional. I think it's foundational to who we are and what we do that we have to stay connected to ourselves, to our
Mhm.
voice, and to the medium of photography in order to be of
Mhm.
service to the people who are coming to us and who are paying us for our work and for our art. It's a big, big deal.
Not optional, it's foundational. That's absolutely
Absolutely.
that's a great great way to look at it. Well, it's Friday. Do you have fun weekend plans? Are you working, shooting?
Probably not. I think I believe I have a rental tomorrow. So I rent out my studio on a case by case basis. So I
Right.
have a gentleman, a dear friend of mine, Eric, who's coming in with a few other photographers, and I'll kind of
Nice.
do lighting for them and styling for their project. But
Good.
other than that, it's I'll do some more editing. I have this beautiful backlog of work right now, and it's just going to be relaxing. So probably
Yeah.
getting out into nature, play some frisbee, get a couple of workouts in, make some good food, eat some good food. So it's really for me La
Mm,
Dolce Vita right now. I'm like, I
nice.
have an opportunity to breathe and rest, and I'm realizing more and more the wiser I get. We won't call it older, we'll say wiser. But the
Yeah.
wiser I get, how important rest is, how important sleep is, how important downtime is.
Sure.
So, there's some really great things coming up for the rest of the year for me, and I want to be able to be present for those,
Mm,
which means now that I have an opportunity to take a break and a breather, I have to be present in that and
yeah.
allow myself to just exist away from art, away from community, away from
Mm,
photography, just to exist as a man and a human being,
sure.
so that I can go into all of this wholehearted and not with my cup completely empty.
Fantastic. Well, my friend, I'm gonna bid you a good long, not a long weekend, just have a good weekend.
You as well.
I'm very grateful for this,
Yeah, me too.
and I hope we get an opportunity to have another chat face to face in person, and
It's going to happen. I'm
yeah,
certain of it. Yeah, and anytime you want to do anything like this, you let me know. I think it's beautiful, and
uh,
thank you for the opportunity to come on here and to have this wonderful chat with you. And certainly thank you to all of you who tuned in or tuned out or spent a little bit of time with us today, and hopefully
yeah,
took away a little bit of joy and inspiration and positivity from this talk.
yeah, very cool. Okay, let's on that note, my friend, thank you,
All right,
and
I'll talk to you soon, my
we'll be
friend.
talking soon.
It's been a
Cheers.
pleasure, truly.
Okay, bye.
Ciao.